Hi, I'm Ralph Preston, and welcome to another Strokes Buddies Stroke Survivor Support Group meeting. We have these meetings every Tuesday, and we try and bring good recovery and science tips to survivors because I believe a focused approach is a better approach. And if you want to take a focused approach, the best way to do that is with some knowledge. And today we've got Genevieve Richardson with us. She's a speech and language pathologist, and she works with both stroke survivors, people with aphasia, and their families, because I think she works beyond just stroke. And, including the family is important, I think, because, well, one of my favorite lines from the movie Aphasia, Hope is a four-letter word, is pretty simple, and it talks about this. It is what happens to one happens to two. Aphasia affects more than just the person who has it. So without further ado, Genevieve, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got it, what drove you to be a speech and language pathologist, and a little bit about your work, and we'll take it from there.
Awesome. And I would love to invite any of you if you have questions. I'm happy to give it my best to answer them for you. Because this is for you guys. It's not about me. It's about you and supporting you wherever you are in your journey. I became a speech pathologist. I thought actually I was going to be an accountant because accounting was easy in high school. And I thought, well, I have no idea, so I'll be an accountant. So that's what I signed up for as my major, and promptly got a D in economics. And I worked really, really hard for that D. Had to retake it, got a B. And at the time, my mom was a nurse in the hospital, actually a case manager, and she introduced me to the speech pathologist at her hospital that she greatly respected. And his work, so this was 34 years ago, his specialty was laryngectomies. And what that means is somebody who had throat cancer and had their voice box taken out, and then they had the hole in the neck to breathe out of, and they had to learn how to talk again. And so his zone of genius was helping them learn how to talk, whether it was swallowing air and like learning to talk on a burp or whatever. And I worked with him one summer when he was running his laryngectomy support group, and I loved the people. They had, pardon me, a new lease on life, and they were making the most of it. They had this really bad cancer diagnosis, but for the most part, once you get the surgery and you do a little radiation after, you're cancer free for the most part, of course. And that just really inspired me. So I went back. This was between my sophomore and junior year, and found out that Cal State University Fullerton had a speech pathology program, and I changed my major. Went home, told my parents, I'm going to be a speech pathologist and I got to get a master's. And they're like, what? I didn't ask. I mean, what is there to ask permission, right? I'm an adult. But that started my journey. And I always fought to get the adult clients in grad school because a lot of the field, everybody defaults to working with kids, and I didn't want to. So it was my experience working with those adults who are making lemonade out of lemons. And that's the long and the short. So I've always worked with aphasia. I would say stroke recovery is near and dear to my heart, and I love working with teams. I love working with physical, occupational therapists. That was my original training out of grad school. I did home health for a lot of years, and for the last 10 years, I have done telepractice. So well before the pandemic, my mentor had been doing telepractice since 2005. He had been a real pioneer in it, and his specialty was chronic aphasia. And that is anything 6 months or more after the onset of aphasia. They call it chronic. So, I learned a whole lot more because I was in people's homes, but in a different way. Just like I'm Zooming with all of you today, I got to meet more of their family. I get to have their family Zoom in during treatment, and we do communication partner training. We can reach anybody with telepractice, which is the beauty. Whereas before, if the family could arrive when I was at the house for treatment, we'd do it, or I talked to them on the phone. But Zoom has opened up a whole new world for support and resources and training. That's the nutshell, Ralph.
All right. Well, we titled this to Busting the Aphasia Plateau Myth. I kind of think I'm sure you've got something in mind, and I don't intend to talk about your subject matter, but a lot of times when I think about aphasia, one of the first plateaus is getting started. So I don't know if you got thoughts on that, or tell us a little bit about how you see people plateauing and how you bust through it.
So to explain the plateau myth, well, first of all, is this something you guys have heard of? Were you ever told, whether it was regarding aphasia or your walking or your hand strength, that, oh, that's it, we're going to discharge you from therapy, that's all you got? Yep.
I think all of us have probably heard that.
Absolutely. And it never sat well with me, because why are we giving up? What we know is that the brain has a remarkable ability to form new connections. We call it neuroplasticity. And so just based on the research about how the brain can rewire, it's got to find ways around those damaged areas. However it was, you came to have a stroke, whatever that damage is, we can find new pathways. We know that the left hemisphere of the brain is the language center, and that the right side of the brain has other skills. And there's redundant systems on both sides. So neuroplasticity, by definition, busts the plateau myth. But how do we maximize? So if your traditional therapy is done, you've done your work in the hospital, you've gone through the rehab, you went home, maybe had some home rehab, and then you go to outpatient, and then they discharge you from there. Well, what if you still have deficits? What if it's, and I'm not even just talking language, as we know from Ralph's example of how he's lived his life, 16 years, Ralph. He
Yes.
went home and started figuring it out. He went home and put weights on walkers and learned how to do yoga and lifted soup cans. Neuroplasticity is the principle that the brain can rewire, but it's not sitting back and hoping. You'll get a little bit with hope, maybe in the first 6 months, right? That's that period of spontaneous recovery that, they love to talk about, oh, you got to maximize your therapy in those first 6 months. After then, you don't make the gains. I reject it. You guys are all examples of resilience, but you have to do more. So how do we find the resources to do more? We were talking before we hit the record button today about singing along to your favorite songs. That was an awesome example you gave, Kevin. You said you do that an hour a day. Why not have the lyrics printed out? Why not start with humming? Try and get some words, circle the words that you really want to emphasize, maybe, or highlight them. Practice, repetition. That is just one of the principles of neuroplasticity. And so we can hope all we want, but we got to believe we can do it, and then we got to do it. And imperfect action is still okay. It doesn't, so many folks that I meet have stopped doing it because they feel like if they can't do it perfectly, they shouldn't do it. And, that's why I wanted to connect with Ralph. I love what he does with Stroke Buddies. I love all the stuff about health and nutrition and mindset and bringing in, experts in different areas. I mean, we're preaching to the choir here because you guys are, right? You guys are here, you're doing it. But how do we get more people to believe, to do? I'd love to hear from you guys, at some point. How do we do it? Or how did you figure out what to do for yourself to work on whatever it is you needed to work on? But treatment now in the aphasia field, we refer to it as the life participation approach. I adore this approach because it looks at you as a whole person. You are not your aphasia if you have aphasia. You are not your weakness on the side of your body. You are not your foot drop. You are a living, breathing human being with your own life experiences, the things that give you joy, your interests, hobbies, what you like to do with your time. All of this has to be taken into consideration. And in addition to that, we have to bring the family in too, because you don't live in a bubble. Your aphasia or your foot drop or being in a wheelchair or walking with a walker, whatever the case is, impacts other people around you. So we have to work on, how do we support in aphasia? How do I work with spouses, care partners, significant others, adult children, grandchildren? I even work with little grandchildren talking to their person with aphasia. Because we have to figure out, it's all about communication. So the life participation approach is literally that. It's a mindset for the clinician to help people communicate. Sure, I can do all the techniques, all the research, the evidence-based stuff to work on finding your words. But then what happens when I'm gone? And I'm not with you doing it. Sure, I can teach you how to do it, but how do I get you to do that in the real world? How can we find, because I was a home health therapist and I used to love going into people's homes because then I got to see how they lived, what was important to them. If I only had a handful of visits to work with somebody in their home, what are the top 2 things we've got to accomplish to give them confidence and independence, strategies? So that's what the life participation approach is about. You're a whole person, you are part of a family, and your family can be your neighbors, your friends. It doesn't have to be blood relatives.
We need to get more therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, to embrace this concept, because they tend to, not all, but a lot tend to look at us, clinically as that one person who comes in that they're to work with. And I think that this kind of approach and a supportive family or community would really help people in their recoveries go a lot further, because people feel very isolated. They often lose motivation, and if they've got other people helping them and holding them up, they're much less likely to do that. We all feel after we have a stroke, we all feel like, even though you know the statistics, you often still, I did. I mean, I knew there were 800,000 people having a stroke every year, but I still felt like I was the only one dealing with it when I was home. So I like that approach. I also like the approach that it's kind of a lifelong event,
It
you
is.
keep getting better, and you're not going to get better in a week or two. So you may as well be in for the long haul. So I once titled a motivational speech I give, but I'll turn it back over to you, Genevieve.
Well, you bring up several interesting points. Each of you having had a stroke, I'm assuming you guys are part of Stroke Buddy, so I assume that's the case. Um, you had to go through a lot of coping and grieving who you were to who you are now. Like during COVID, what is it? The new reality? What there was some catchphrase, and I'm blanking on what it was, but it irritates me because I don't like it. I think it just it doesn't take into account you having to make so many adjustments to live your life after you've had a stroke or somebody who's had a brain injury or any other kind of neurologic disease. There's so much coping that needs to happen. You have to figure out who you are and what you want. And that's probably one of the most important things I help provide when I work with somebody in treatment. Because I had this one gentleman, he had his stroke at 49, and he was an executive in a tech company. And he thought of himself as the man in the room. He was like the center of it all. He's like, hey, like everybody would talk to him. You always knew where he was because you could hear him, and he was just joyful and such. He ended up going, so he's a VP in this company, and he stayed home for a year, and then he went back to work, but as nearly an entry level in sales. He's a VP of sales for a tech company, and he felt shame that he didn't go back to his previous job, even though he was working and he was making a good living. It was one day we were talking about how he and his wife were getting along. Not that they were fighting, but he avoided a lot of things that he used to do with her. The traveling, the conversations. And we found out is because he felt shame that he had even had the stroke at such a young age, prime of his career. And it was when we started to talk about that he started to really make gains in treatment, whatever it is we were working on. And we did a lot of very functional things in treatment so that he could get better at his job, so he could have ways to work with his sales guys on a one-on-one, because in a group it was too hard, right? Too much noise, too many conversations. He did much better in a quiet office, one-on-one training, because he knew his stuff. None of that went away. Some of his words he struggled with, but my point is we had to deal with his identity and who he was now and where he wanted to go. And that's when he really started making the progress, because then he started to believe he could do more.
Also acceptance.
Absolutely. And I don't think it goes away. It's not a one and done. Like you said, Ralph, it's not that you're going to wake up and it's all going to be better. Unfortunately, it's a lifelong process. And as you get better at something, find the next thing that's going to challenge you. Something you're avoiding doing, well, maybe that's the next thing you need to figure out how to tackle. And all of that is neuroplasticity. It's putting yourself in situations that are new where you have to learn to adapt, how you learn how to carry over strategies, perhaps. So I definitely would love to share with you. I made a resource for any of you that are interested. Ralph will give you the link to get it, but it's about resources and some questions and answers about neuroplasticity and how do you do it. So I'm curious how each of you go about in your day. What is it you're working on that challenges you? You don't have to. I would love to hear. John, you want to unmute?
Yeah, I'm a stroke advocate like the rest of us, but I do speeches on stroke. I started a stroke support group of my own, and I was at the convention this past weekend on stroke. And the last thing, I did the commercial on stroke for internet TV.
Awesome.
So
Love that.
that helps me see my background.
I do.
I have a mock radio station. I listen to Spotify, introduce the song, play the song, say the song again when it's through, and do a commercial. I write the commercial. It's not available on the internet. It's just me practicing my speech.
That's brilliant.
John, if
Yeah.
I recall, you did all this to help you get over your aphasia. Is that correct?
Correct. Right.
Love it. I have a friend of mine. I'm happy to call him a friend. His name's Aaron Avila. He's got Stroke TV Media, and he doesn't have aphasia. He has dysarthria, so the sound and the quality of his speech, you really have to concentrate to hear him. He has been doing a live show for years, and that's how he got himself. So he's also an advocate like you are, John. And that's how he coped. But as his story went, he was on death's door 3 years after his stroke. He was debating how to commit suicide when he what was it? He was on the internet and he came across this guy. He's a CEO, and I'm blanking on his name right now. And he was listening to the CEO's speech, and it inspired him. And he reached out to him via email, and they connected, and that was the beginning of his change in putting himself out there and trying new things and his neuroplasticity. There's videos of him, walking around his pool for exercise. And, he's doing it like you guys are doing it. You're here because you're involved, you're trying more things, you're connecting, you've got your community. And that is so important. But how do we get other people to do it?
Most of us know Aaron. I've actually been on a show, so I think most people here are familiar with him.
Awesome.
Yeah, whatever you're having, what I'm hearing is whatever you're having challenges with, take it on head on, and embrace it, knock it down.
That's it. Walk in the path of your fear is a quote by now a friend of ours named Eric Best. That I don't know if he was the original one, but that's who we heard it from. He's an author, and there's some power in thinking, what am I most afraid of, and what are the steps? Can I break it down into smaller steps so it's not so big? Yes, John.
This might help people. This is the exercise I do to talk clearly. See my hands?
Yes.
I do this. This tells me to slow down my speech. It really helps me when I speak in public. So
that's down. Like a self-cueing technique you use to
exactly
to like keep your pace.
Right. I sound like a robot, but it works.
It works.
I've
Good for
heard
you.
from a number of people with aphasia that they do better if they slow down and are more intentional about their
Right.
speech. So that seems to be um, that seems to be a valid technique for a lot of people.
Okay. Okay.
Well, the brain, when you have aphasia, the brain just needs a little extra time. And if you pause, what you, the person with aphasia, if you pause, think of your words and then say it versus being automatic. So much of us want to get back to automatic speech where we don't have to, we just have like this little thought and somehow our words magically come out and make sense. But intentional speech is actually better neuroplastically speaking because you're really having to pull those areas together to make it happen. And when your communication partners, if they speak just a smidge slower, for me, it's an occupational, that I always speak a little slower. It's just what I do. And pausing and not loading a sentence with 3 different concepts, right? Just one concept, pause, move on. And that's just one small example of something I would teach to families. Turn off the TV. Don't be in the middle of a crowd. Don't go to dinner and sit in the middle of the noisy restaurant at prime time, or if it's a restaurant that has a lot of background. That's setting yourself up for a challenge that it would be nicer if you didn't have to overcome that plus your aphasia.
Well, you can focus a lot better without TV, background noise, restaurants, and same with slowing down slightly. For anybody out there who doesn't know this, you don't, slowing down does not mean talking to someone like they're a 5-year-old.
That's right.
That will really irritate most people who have aphasia. I didn't, but I've seen that in action. We had a couple of people here that would probably tell you that they don't like being talked down to when it's happened. There's nothing wrong with their brain. They have a communication issue between their language center and getting the words out of their lips.
That's right. That's right. So there's resources for neuroplasticity. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what these are. First, let's just talk about some principles. Use it or lose it. I used to go in my home health days. I'd go into somebody's house and they'd be in the recliner chair all day, every day. Called it death by daytime TV. And if you don't practice, if you don't use it, you're not reinforcing those skills. Just like if you're any motor skill, or when you were younger, if you were learning a sport, if you had to practice to get better at it. So you use it or lose it. That is one of the big principles of neuroplasticity. Use it and improve it. Do something purposefully. Like Ralph, when he was doing his own rehab and using things around the house to strengthen the left side of his body. Once he got better at the soup can, he found the next heaviest thing that he could grip and hold on to. That's using it and improving it. Being specific, working on, I'm going to talk to my wife better. We're going to make sure we turn off the TV. We're going to look at each other. We're not going to be trying to do 2 things at the same time. We're going to connect. Be specific, be intentional. Intensity. John, I heard you talking a lot about how you're doing, the process of your radio show. When you do that, you're working intensively. You want to do things for a period of time. If you wear out in 15 minutes, fine. Maybe in a few days you can do 16 minutes, but be intentional and really try to build up that endurance for whatever it is you're doing. Doesn't have to be speech. It can be you know, bicep curls, whatever it is. Time matters. We know that spontaneous recovery is that first 6 months after a stroke, as if you were to do nothing, your brain will still heal and you will make progress. But after that 6 months, that plateau, the people like to say, your brain can still improve. The improvements may not be the big rocks, but they may be little rocks. And those little rocks do add up. So we want to remember that. Transference. Transfer means carrying over, taking what you're doing in one situation and applying it to another situation. And then interference. Interference means it's like you're challenging yourself. So maybe now you've improved your communication with your spouse. So now maybe you can take it one step further and let the TV be on in the background. That's interference, right? It's interference. It's an extra challenge. Or maybe you go to a coffee shop and practice doing that same kind of conversation. So those are just some of the basic principles of neuroplasticity. So how does one do that on their own? How do you get the benefits of neuroplasticity if you're not working with a therapist? There's lots of ways to do it. There are aphasia apps out there, and there are many good ones. There is a website called aphasiasoftwarefinder.org to help you find an app that might be good to work with. There's online games. One of my favorite apps, when I used to have more time, I'd sit on the couch with my iPad, I'd watch TV and play Word Chums. Word Chums is like Scrabble, but not near as complicated. And I love the electronic version because you can just try new combinations and you might even learn a new word or two. But you could play against the computer, and there's 9 different levels, and you can play with friends. I would sit on the couch at night, and I'd have games going on with 5 different clients. You know, while they're working on their word, I'd go to a different game, take a turn, come back to them. Wordle, words with friends. There's lots of apps where you can be interactive with people you know or people you don't know, or play against the computer. There are apps that, for those that struggle to talk or need more support to talk, we have what's called AAC devices, augmentative and alternative communication devices. There are some apps you can put on your phone for free that can help with that. One of them I love is called Click AAC. It's a free app. And basically you can take a picture of anything with your phone, upload that picture to Click AAC, and it's going to analyze that picture and say, the man is looking at the plant. The plant is green with red flowers. It'll just kind of anticipate based on the content of the photo, and it gives you sentences and icons to go with the words, and you can practice. I mean, I think it's brilliant. We all know that when we take care of our bodies, if we eat right, sleep, I can't tell you how important sleep is, feeds the mind. We have to take care of our bodies completely to keep the brain strong, right? We know this. Ralph has, he's got his nutrition, your nutrition group. I'm forgetting that's health and wellness or nutrition and wellness. Ralph, so important. Physical exercise. We all know this, right? That seems to be like the prescription for everything. You got to be active in somehow, some way. The Aphasia Institute. Go ahead.
I was just say one thing about sleep is we have a neuroscientist in our community, Dr. Hetzler, and he made us aware of the fact that while you're sleeping, your brain decides what it's going to store and remember from today. So there's a term for it. It's not packing, but it's kind of like packing. It takes the things that are important and packs them away so that you remember them. So if you don't, and I don't remember which kind of sleep it occurs in, but if you don't get all different kinds of sleep, then you're not going to do as much remembering. So it's kind of a technique for reinforcing all the repetition that you do in a day. So if you're working hard in the daytime and not sleeping at night, you're working against that. Of course, some people have sleep issues and they're sometimes hard to resolve. So it's not like they're
They
staying
are
up
extremely
watching
hard.
TV. Anyway.
Yeah, a few years ago, my husband was noticing problems with me. He said, "You are forgetting stuff." He's like, "Do you have like dementia?" Like, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding, and I don't mean to make a joke of it. What ended up happening, I went to an ear, nose, and throat doctor, and I had a moderate severe sleep apnea. And I didn't know it. And it was just kind of this cumulative effect of not sleeping that was really affecting my memory. I was on autopilot, doing, and I was working. I'm a mom, driving, doing everything I had to do. But it was a struggle. And I just thought I was working too many hours, and so that I was tired. But really, 47 times an hour, I was not breathing, and we solved it. And it took a good 6 months of sleeping to improve it. It's pretty crazy. But just to add on what you were saying, Ralph, your brain also has to process toxins out, and you do this when you're sleeping. You have to have that time to consolidate those memories and those brain patterns that you worked on so hard during the day, and your brain helps clean itself overnight. So then there's always working with a speech pathologist again, even if you're outside of that time of the traditional rehab treatment. Working with YouTube videos, whether it's on stuff related to language or seated yoga or adaptive, whatever your activity is, getting on YouTube and trying new things, learning new things. All of this is neuroplasticity. It helps make those brain connections. And even if watching a YouTube video may not directly help your speech, it is supporting your overall thinking, and that's neuroplasticity. There is, I'm interviewing a speech pathologist today that just launched SpeechFlix. SpeechFlix is the Netflix of speech therapy videos, and she's got 200 different videos on there to be practicing your speech. Finding your tribe. You guys are all, again, I'm preaching to the choir because you guys are here and you're part of Stroke Buddies. But finding your community, people that you can learn from, reach out to, problem solve with. All of this is necessary for not only neuroplasticity, just your mental health and recovery. So I have all of these resources on a handout that you guys can download. There's got links in there. The principles of neuroplasticity is in there. And then there's 10 questions and answers about neuroplasticity. And I'm always open to more questions, whether it's now or somewhere down the road, because I learn from you how I can do my job better and help bridge the gap between the rehab you had and your life. Because as we know, once you get out of the hospital, that kind of resources and support, that goes away pretty quickly. And you have to start figuring it out for yourself.
But one more thing you can do, and we've got a little bit of this going on. I don't know how to get more of it going on. One of the concepts I had for Stroke Buddies is putting people together. We've got a couple people who are language buddies, if you will. They practice language together, and that's good for both of them. Most notably is our two in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that I happen to notice that they both were from Tulsa, and I kind of stuck them together. They learned a lot about each other. Well, they started becoming friends. They learned they had similar types of stroke, the same type of language issues, and now I think they've been practicing language together for first they texted, then they started talking on the phone and make up lists, every daily lists of difficult words they come in contact with and share them and practice them. So I wish there was some way to put more people together, but first you have to find out who's got language skills or language issues and who doesn't, and then where they're located doesn't matter. These two have to be in the same city, but you can have a group called accountability partners that needs a whole lot more people. The idea there would sort of similar, that you could find somebody to bounce ideas and exercises and things off. I know that, Kevin, don't you go to doesn't Jocelyn Barrett in there, she has a Zoom, there's some emphasis on language. People can practice together. I've always thought it would be good to have like a language class, like a yoga class. So
I don't go necessarily to any language focused Zooms, but you know, I try to participate in as many as I can, to where I've got Zoom meetings every day except for Friday, because I don't go to the breath class because I've got my own way of doing that, and that's when I'm just not that into. So yesterday I posted a series of links, because it's hard. It's hard for people. You know, I get people that say, "Hey, can you send me the link?" It's like, yeah, okay. And everybody's like, "Can you send me the link for Zoom or something like that?" And it's like, well, here's all the links for the weekly meetings. And this week, you know, uh, my local stroke survivor group, that is physically local to me, they're doing a Zoom, which they seem to do every month. So I put that up there. If anybody wants to join in, you know, the more that participate in, the better. Always the better. So you know, I put it on two different groups, the links, so that hey, maybe somebody else can. Oh, wow. Oh, and all you have to do is click this link. All I have to do is, hey, I'm in. That if that able something, I'll send it to everybody in this meeting. But yeah,
I
stuff.
love that.
Anyway,
Absolutely. Go ahead, John.
Ralph. Joycelyn meeting is weekly on Tuesdays, and everyone there is aphasia related. So sometimes it's hard to understand one another. But we make up with the differences, and we laugh and we joke about things. So it's quite fun to be in her Zoom meeting.
whose meeting is that, Winnie?
Joycelyn Barrett.
Okay,
Jocelyn Barrett, yeah.
That's who I was talking. That's who I was talking about.
Right.
It's at 4. Wait, is it at 4 p.m. Eastern today?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's the one that's at 4 p.m. Eastern today. It's
No,
Tuesday.
4 p.m. local, West Coast.
Right.
Eastern.
Yeah, it's 1 p.m. West Coast. Yeah.
7 p.m. here, because
Yeah.
I've wanted to join it, and a lot of times I end up busy at 7 p.m. I wanted to check it out. That was the one I was talking about. So Kevin, you just go there for the camaraderie more than the aphasia focus. I know she has aphasia, and
oh yeah, a lot of the people in that group have aphasia, and No, I mean, I got into it with the last week with the what's his name? And he's got a traumatic brain injury that gives him aphasia, and he has trouble speaking and putting it all together. And so I got into it with him, and we were relating in ways. So yeah, I mean, I I participated in that with Winnie. I learned about it through Winnie. So yeah.
Well, I found that people with aphasia, and when they're in a Zoom meeting with a lot of, even with stroke survivors that don't have aphasia, they're hesitant to talk. So just like we feel more comfortable with stroke survivors in a Zoom meeting, I could see how people with aphasia would be more willing to open up and feel a little more comfortable when they're surrounded with people with the same issues. It's about community, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Jenny or Genevieve, were you resending out the links to us, or were Ralph the links you were talking about?
Yeah, Ralph, would you be able to, that link I sent you on email?
Oh yeah, and I also wrote down SpeechFlix, aphasia softwarefinder.org. Click.
That's all those links are in. If you download the PDF I made, all those links, they're hyperlinked in there. So
Okay,
you
great.
can get straight to them.
Also,
go ahead.
you're recording this. Can I play it later for my wife to hear? This is a
Sure.
great session.
Yeah,
This is-
I'll edit it and put it on the YouTube channel along with information on how you can contact Genevieve, the link to the PDF download. I only saw that briefly this morning right before the meeting, Genevieve, so I didn't realize it had
Well,
hyperlinks.
I just finished it this morning, Ralph.
Okay.
Genevieve,
Well,
Genevieve?
I wouldn't have madly written down all these things. I was going to remind you to, get me those links. I'll put anything, underneath the video in the description. I often do. I put contact information, things we talked about. If we talked about some other video, I'll often put that I've recorded. I'll often put a link for that. Most anything and everything. I'm glad to know that all those links are in that PDF, because that way I don't have to get them from you and circle back.
That's right.
And drop them all in there. Although, I might actually go to the PDF and pull out some of them and also post them as direct links, because I find the easier you make things for people, the more likely they are to just click. Oh, okay, here's an app. I'll just click on that. Oh, a PDF. They might think it's a technical paper or something and not click. So anyway, yes.
Genevieve,
To
this
answer
is
your
the
question,
best
John.
session I've ever heard. This is the best session I've ever heard, Genevieve. Thank you.
Oh,
Whoa.
thank you. Well,
Yeah.
if you're not sick of hearing too much of me, I do have a podcast. Ralph was
Oh.
on it. The Listen for Life Aphasia podcast. It's on all your podcast platforms. It's also on YouTube.
Listen for life.
At Life Speech Pathology.
Is it also
YouTube.
linked in that PDF?
Yes. The link goes to my podcast website, because now I do all my podcasts on video. And the reason for that is I love captions. I don't know about you guys. I can't watch TV without captions now, because too many of these well-paid actors mumble. And so on my website are all the episodes. I'm in the 90s now. July 4th will be my 100th episode. I'm pretty proud of that, but I interview survivors. We talk about therapy techniques, a lot of self-care stuff in there for you as well as your care partner. And I just use care partner as a general term, and instead of saying your spouse, your significant, you get the idea.
Genevieve, can you call me after this session on the phone?
Sure. You want
I'll
to
come-
put it in the chat?
I will. Okay, thanks.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Life Speech Pathology is my private practice, and there we do treatment. And I also do care partner training. You know, the person doesn't have to be a client of mine. I can just do care partner coaching, about communication techniques, and launching soon. I'm going to be launching my own community for folks with aphasia and their care partners, where we do weekly either support groups, talk about communication issues. We'll have hot seats where somebody will come with a situation, and we're going to problem solve it, break it down, figure out how to, make communication better. So lots of different ways, plus the podcast. Always looking for ideas, guess anybody that wants to talk about a particular topic. I'm open to it. Thank you, John. I really appreciate. I got your number. Take a screenshot
Thank
of it.
you.
Questions? Anything you want to talk about? Aphasia, language, communication. I know we're wrapping it up, right, Ralph?
Yeah, well, if people have no, welcome Tom, by the way. Yeah,
Tom.
anybody who's got any questions, speak now or forever hold your peace, as they
That's
say.
right. As they say.
Although it's not a wedding.
I had a situation when I first had my touch of aphasia, and I started with alphabets. I went down the line, ABC and all that, to 26 alphabets, and I made words for it. Each day I added a word on, and I said the words over and over. And then in days to come, I started talking to my friend over the phone. And so I told her, I cannot talk good, but I hope you can understand me. And so she said, I can't understand. So she said real slowly what she was trying to tell me. So I repeated to her what she said. So that helped a lot. And then I started reading my book, so saying words out loud and all that. So I think that really helped me as well. But other than that, I don't do much of anything as far as my aphasia is going on.
Well, first off, I would say, gold star for you, Winnie, for figuring it out. We talked about you don't have to be perfect at anything. You can use your junk mail, folks. You can read the names of the companies. You can practice your numbers by reading out addresses. There's a way. So Winnie, good for you for coming up with your method, and look at how good you're talking.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, and I'm not a speech and language pathologist, but I had somebody with aphasia, and the physical therapist I was working with suggested taking magazines and picking out the more difficult or multi-syllable words. So I would just take a magazine over there, pick an article, and pick out words, say them to him, and have him repeat them. And if you didn't get them right, I'd say it again, have him repeat it again, back to repetitions, which we all know builds neuroplasticity. And that was early on in my working with people live in person, but I saw it definitely help him, and he was lucky to not have really crippling aphasia. So
It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to have an app. You can look at a recipe on the internet, and if you can print it out, you can circle verbs. So many of my clients they're what's called noun bound. They're good at labeling things, what's this? What's this? Labeling nouns, but it's the verbs. If you could only get one word out, let it be a verb, because it gives much more intention. If you're like, jump, like, now you have an idea of what you're looking for, right? Somebody's gonna jump, or there's a dog jumping, or there's a squirrel, whatever. But if I just said squirrel, doesn't give quite as much information. So there's lots of ways to do it. I love working with recipes for those that have, an interest in food and cooking. And it doesn't have to be to go cook it. It's because they're written in a certain way. They're simple, they're clear. You can find the verb, stir, pour, heat,
Chop.
right? Chop, good stuff in there. So
Measure.
doesn't have to be fancy to be effective, right, Winnie?
I didn't even know Winnie had aphasia for a long time. I've known her 5 years. I've known you got over it within the first year or so of your stroke, because I think I met you when you were only a year or two out.
Wow.
So good job.
Yep, good job. Love it.
I only found that out a couple months ago.
See, look at that. National Aphasia Association has some groups. They have regular conversation groups. I'm a co-host on one of them that meets on the first Friday of the month, and it's about sharing traveling. So different people will send to my co-host Craig, who has aphasia, their vacation pictures, and then they'll talk about it, and then we'll ask questions, and it's a great group. Virtual Connections, if you guys are familiar with them, Bilingraphica, they have a calendar that changes every month. Many of these sessions are led by a speech pathologist, but they're on topics like pets and fishing and cooking, and they've even got a running one on there, running after a stroke. And it's not all just for aphasia, it's stroke too, plus support groups. So there's lots of resources. I've linked those also in the PDF.
Great, because that was going to be my next question.
Yep, it's all in there, because I'm all about resources and empowering and helping in whatever way I can.
All right, anybody else, or should we let Genevieve go? All right, well, I guess I want to thank you for taking the time out today. Genevieve's very helpful, and I'm sure a lot of folks will benefit from it, and also from all the resources that you're providing.
Terrific.
And somebody got a dog barking.
Oh yeah, dog bark. Somebody's ringing the doorbell. The beauty of Zoom, right?
Is that you?
That's my dog, my doorbell. So I will jump off. Really nice to meet you all. Have a blessed day and keep up the good work.
All right,
The
well, thank
song's
you
in the
again.
chat. The song's in the chat.
Yes, I got it. I'll give you a call in just a minute, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph, for the opportunity to meet your community. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Do all you can with what you have, in the time you have, in the place you are. Do all you can. Do all you can.